Hey guys, welcome back to Talking Strongman. Today's guest is Gabriel Pena, just recently back from World's Strongest Man, preferred to be known as Gabe, is that right?
Gabe, yeah.
How's things, buddy? First World's
It's
Strongest Man.
World's Strongest Man was a dream come true. We'll get into how it all went down, but just the whole idea of, guys who initially were my rivals or were my idols turned out to be my rivals this past week. That was a very profound experience. And of course, even just talking to you, you're someone that when I just got my feet wet in the sport, is definitely looking towards your success as motivation. So it's good to be home. It's good to have that experience done. It's good to be talking to you.
Well, it's good to have you on. And yeah, I can sort of remember my first experience at World's Strongest Man. I was in a group with Mariusz Pudzianowski, who was, the best guy at the time. And that first contest, you're good enough to be there. You've trained hard and you can do all the events, but there's a little bit, it's daunting being next to these sort of legends of the sport, if you like. But, you proved right away that you deserve to be there. I mean, your deadlift, that was, I've got to say, as soon as your name was, and I hold my hands up high, I didn't know who you were before I saw your name pop up at World's Strongest Man. And then a few of the clients that I coach said, "Oh, this guy's really good. Go and check him out." I was watching some of your videos, and then your performance on the deadlift, particularly, was phenomenal at World's Strongest Man. Must have been good. You beat guys. Luke Richardson is a huge deadlifter. To beat him and just be one rep behind Jerry Pritchett, who at one time was challenging for that 500 kilo, magical number. It must have felt pretty good.
It felt great, but deadlift since day one has always been one of my specialties. I love it, and I definitely know that I felt the sense of belonging at that stage. I don't want to speculate too much of the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, but yeah. I could have gone head to head with Novikov on that max deadlift. I know it. That's a good height for me, and we would have put on a show.
It's a good thing to kind of have that belief, and it's one of those things. I mean, I could look back at so many shows, and so many of us can, and say, what if? Yeah. The fact is, you've been to your first World's Strongest Man. It didn't go how you wanted. Obviously, you had to pull out, which is devastating for any athlete. Just quickly, just talk us through that. I mean, you had a decent start in the farmers. Your deadlift was awesome, and then there was something up. Was it your heart rate just wouldn't come down, or?
Yeah, so let me just give you the rundown. The first day of competition was a very long day. We were the first heat to get to the competition center. We were the last heat to leave. And on the deadlift, by the time we had gotten to that event, such a high output event, max reps in a minute, it was very late at night. I mean, we've been strained there all day. I mean, I'm sure you know how those days goes. The TV production side of it really takes a lot longer than we're anticipating. But by the time I finished that deadlift, I really felt like something was up. It took a lot longer for me to calm down and to recover. Anytime we do something high output like that, sure, it takes 5 minutes to really restore, but it was taking a bit longer this time. I even remember going to dinner with the guys back at the hotel and just saying, man, I still haven't recovered from this deadlift yet. I feel like my heart is still beating a little faster. So, I did what everyone else would do and think a full night's sleep would do the trick. But I woke up the next morning, for day 2 of the competition, and I still felt like my heartbeat was irregular. Checking the pulse of the neck, I could feel that some strokes were stronger than others, and some felt like a weak flutter rather than a strong stroke. So when we got to the convention center for the competition, we were still in the midst of a hurricane, so it was indoors at this point. I felt it was my duty as an athlete to make sure that the medical staff was aware that I felt something was off. I had no idea I would be pulled out of the competition, but I would be very remiss to have something happen while I was performing and they not have any idea what went wrong. So I went and talked to the medical staff. At first impression, they're like, okay, you probably just have some pre-competition jitters. The heart rate's a little elevated, but they had paramedics on staff there too, and they had a mobile electrocardiogram unit with them. They hooked me up to the electrodes and they printed out a graph. And as soon as the head doctor there for World's Strongest Man pulls out the graph, he looks at it, I see his eyes open up wide like this. I know it's not necessarily a good sign. He tells me he's going to talk to a cardiologist, and he comes back, 5 minutes later, and he just looks me dead in the eyes. He's like, Gabe, you can't compete today. There's just no way you can compete today. And he told me my heart was an AFib. There was an electro miscommunication from the top valves of the heart to the bottom. The top valves were fluttering. The bottom was still nice and strong. So the concern was, especially with the loading medley that we had that day and the log press that my heats had that day, if the demand on my heart should be too much to where it can't keep up, well, then the lights go out. And whether or not I've got a big object on my shoulder or above overhead, that can easily be a life or death situation.
It's a really tough thing to face as an athlete. But I do think the fact that World's Strongest Man does focus on looking after the athletes in terms of getting the medicals done, having doctors and medics there on hand. And obviously, as hard as it is for an athlete to be told they have to pull out, especially first ever World's Strongest Man, there's always a next time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you were devastated when they said,
when he told me those words fell like a hammer. I mean, it's like you said, my first World's Strongest Man, I feel an instant sense of belonging. Like, this is the stage where my performance belongs. Yeah. And then to hear those words leave the doctor's mouth, it's just crushing. I mean, I had to remove myself for a second, take a whole lap around edges of the center that I didn't even know existed, and kind of walk it off a little bit. But like you said, for the World's Strongest Man to be equipped with all of the care for the athletes, to where, even if I feel that just something is wrong, I have the ability to go and consult with medical professionals. That's invaluable. Yeah. So many guys in this sport, I'm sure, you can attest to hearing a lot of this too. It's like, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll sell my soul to the devil and we'll just leave it all behind.
As athletes, we only really, we care about winning. That's what or being the best that we can be. And sometimes we don't care enough about our bodies. And, I've criticized the World's Strongest Man in the past for event selection, or I don't like the stop-start nature of World's Strongest Man, because that causes a lot of the muscle tears and those type of injuries. But the fact they focus on, and to be fair to them, they've always made sure our hearts are working kind of, properly. I've every time I've gone to World's Strongest Man, I've had to go through medicals before we get there. As you would have known this year, when you get there, you have to have medicals. They have a proper doctor on board. They have proper, physios, chiropractors, osteos on as part of the team. And that side of things, I think, is very good. They usually, I don't know who the doctor was this year, but it's usually quite a nice team that they have that work with the athletes.
Yeah, and it's not just one doctor, it's multiple too. So, definitely felt well cared for the entire time, which is invaluable as a competitor,
That's good. And obviously the heart is a serious, issue. When we're talking, and like I said, I think things need to improve with the structure of the show, so we don't have as many muscle tears and those type of injuries, because there was quite a few of those this year as well. Yeah. But the heart is very different to a muscle tear. It's
you only get one, and
you don't get a second chance with that. So it is one of the plus sides to World's Strongest Man, that they do monitor that side of things when we're competing. And I always, as an athlete, I always liked to get tested each year, just to see what my health was like, and how my heart rate was, blood pressure, monitoring your heartbeat, etc., just to make sure we are physically still fit, because what we do is a tough sport, and we're bigger than the average person, carrying a lot more muscle, some of us, myself, a lot more fat. It's important to keep an eye on that health side of things as well. So as frustrating as it must have been for yourself, I'm glad you're okay now. I'm glad everything's kind of back to normal, and you've got that first World's Strongest Man in the bag, and that first one for most of us is a real learning curve. There's been, very few people go to Worlds. There'll be people watching saying Jukka Haller and Magnus Ver Magnusson, and yes, they did win on their debut, but it's extremely rare we see anyone winning on their debut. Usually, you can probably vouch for this yourself, and I always say on these shows, World's Strongest Man's a very different show to any other show that you do.
100%. It's and throwing that whole TV production aspect into it too, that makes it very different than, I know Strongman is bigger over in Europe than it is in the States currently, but we haven't really had any shows where there's that much production involved. So like you said, the whole stop-start nature, the whole TV time aspect, where we start at 9 o'clock, but it doesn't actually start until 11, that was tough. It was tough to accommodate to, but we have to be malleable and adaptable in this sport. I do wish, though, that there were things that were a little bit more scheduled and more concise in terms of timing and when we would perform. I know there was a lot of frustration there.
It's a complaint that we've been having for years. You know, it's TV time rather than you can be told. I mean, obviously I wasn't there this year, so butt in and interrupt me. But I've been in the past where you're told you're going to do an event at 9 o'clock, for instance, and then it's like, okay, we're going to do it 9:30, 10 o'clock, and it just keeps getting pushed back. And that's hard as an athlete because you're trying to warm up, you're trying to get yourself ready, and it becomes frustrating. It becomes hard to know when to start doing your warm-ups, when to get your body warm. And I actually believe that's the reason there's been, I mean, people kind of talk about my injuries over the years. 90% of my injuries have been at World's Strongest Man. Not so, I mean, I have got injured in one-day shows, but it's a rarer occurrence.
Right.
It's usually been at World's Strongest Man where it has been that stop-start nature where you warm up, you get yourself ready, and then suddenly, you know, oh no, we've got to send the drone up and, you know, get these shots right, or whatever the reason, you know, the rain's come down and we've got to delay things, and it's frustrating as an athlete.
I will say on that subject, one of the most frustrating aspects was in terms of when we had to leave the hotel and get to the competition center. And then when we finally left the competition center and get back to the hotel, they had told us, especially for my heat, for example, we were the first out the door. We had to have breakfast by 5 a.m. We had to leave by 7 a.m. And the show was supposed to start at 9. The show didn't wind up starting until closer to 11. And so we're talking about trying to cram as much sleep as we can into these nights. A lot of us are traveling from different time zones too. So there's that whole other aspect. And I think if they could have had the scheduling a little bit more realistic in terms of when they were actually going to start, that would have saved a lot of stress. And even looking back to my injury, I don't know the exact causes of why my heart went into AFib, but without knowing exactly, we have to take this kind of investigative approach. And one of the biggest weak links is, are you getting enough quality sleep? And when we're talking about athletes getting ready for this stop-start nature of competition, that's one thing that I think the production staff and the World's Strongest Man staff could have organized a little bit better. And I hope they do in coming years, because messing with sleep, that's the holy grail, you know?
Yeah, I hope so too. And like you say, strongmen now are a lot more professional. They take a much more scientific approach to not just training, but nutrition, to recovery, all the kind of, you know, aspects of improving. And I mean, I can tell you, 12 years I've been to World's Strongest Man, 12 years it's been the same. In terms of, and it's the same complaint every year. We're all kind of complaining about it, but it's that nature of it's a TV show, essentially. And that's the frustrating part. When you come, I mean, I appreciate it's a great, and it is a great TV show when it's produced, and we'll watch it at Christmas time, and it looks fabulous. It is the best show to watch. But when you're used to competing week in, week out, like we do, you know, we've done many contests, one-day shows where you get on with it. Even the one-day stadium shows, you know, in the UK, the big shows, we're not stop-start there. We start and we get on with it, and it's much safer for the athletes. It's you know when to warm up properly, you know when you're about to go, and then you just get on with the show. It's a much better approach to look after and also get the best out of the athletes.
Yeah. And I think, you know, all the athletes are on the same playing field, but you talk about cumulative injuries at the end of the year. We don't want to see these athletes getting hurt. I don't want to be getting hurt. I want to be able to continue after the show and go straight into training for the next one, you know? Yeah. So, you know, we can hope and we can complain and gripe, and maybe they will fall on some ears listening sometime, but
let's hope so. I mean, it's great that you've got that first World's Strongest Man in the bag. Do you think having that experience now would help you going back next year?
Oh, absolutely. I feel armed with the experience of this year. You know, prior to World's Strongest Man, thinking to my previous competitions, especially here in the States, I feel like I've built such a strong platform that I go into these shows 100% confident that I'm going to dominate. And that's not sounding arrogant. That's just the time and the experience and the repetition that I feel 100% confident in that. But taking it to the world stage, the 25 top men in the world for that competition, that's different. You don't have that certainty or assuredness that you are going to dominate everything. And that was a nice new change of pace for me in terms of reestablishing my mental game, you know, putting myself in a new environment, a new structure of competition, a much lengthier in terms of days and time spent. Going into this in 2021, I want to be right back there. That's where I belong. Going back into this, I feel even more experienced having this under the belt, to where the performance in 2021, regardless if I wouldn't have gotten pulled out in 2020, it will be better. It will be better.
Good stuff. So are you back training now? Or
I am.
A few days off?
I had my first kind of getting the feet wet again training session on Tuesday once I got back. Very easy stuff. Trying to put a lot more emphasis on cardio with the whole having to withdraw from a heart issue thing. But I actually have a big lifting session planned for tonight, maybe some deadlifts and squats. So nice. Looking forward to that.
So what's the next plan for you then? Like, obviously this year's been all over the place. It was great that World's Strongest Man actually happened. Have you got any immediate goals coming up, or is it all about off-season training now towards next year?
Well, I am going to enjoy in the very immediate future kind of getting back to some of the lifts that I didn't necessarily get to practice much, the things that I really enjoy. But I do have a pro show here in the States, in Kentucky, the Mammoth Pro in January that I plan on doing. And, I know I had heard some rumblings that World's Strongest Man is hoping to get back on the old schedule of being around April or May. And should that be the case, I want to give it everything to get back there. I feel like there's a fresh fire lit under my butt, and I really want to make that statement. I know I can.
It's good. How about coming over for some of the, we obviously have the North American Championships and stuff like that, but some of the Giants live shows. Would you like to?
I would love to. Talking to all the guys over the course of the past week, I feel so inspired to get out and do more international competition. I actually haven't done a single international show, really? But watching how it's so inspiring as an American athlete to see how strongman is massive in your neck of the woods. I would love to take part of something. Yeah, I would love to be a part of a stadium show. That's just amazing.
They are, without question, the best shows to be a part of. Just having 10, 12,000 actual strongman fans. It was different for you at Worlds this year because there wasn't really any fans.
Right.
But normally at World's Strongest Man, you just have some local people watching you. They're like, oh, look at these big freaks. They look fun to watch. Whereas at the arena shows, we have paying proper fans that understand the sport. They follow what we do on a regular basis. A lot of them will lift themselves. And it's a real, it's an amazing experience. You've got to make sure if you get the opportunity, you come over. And
I absolutely want to. I hope the rest of this, the next year isn't as much in flux as the past year was, because I feel so inspired to get abroad and do some big shows over there.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. Like, how old are you at the moment?
I just turned 30 a few months ago.
Okay. So you're older than some of the guys. We've got talk of, some incredible youngsters right now. People talk about Luke Richardson, Tom Stoltman, Evan Singleton, obviously Novikov. He's just, do you feel at 30 you can compete against these guys?
Oh yeah. I feel like I'm not even close to my prime yet.
I'm glad to hear that, because you must get it as well. A lot of the time I get people asking me, am I too old to get involved or am I past it? And it's a real stupid question. It's not a stupid question. I take that back, but people think just because someone's young, it's the be all and end all. But you look at how many successful guys we've had that didn't break into the top level until around the 30. Some of them even later. You look at, Mr. Drunas didn't win his first World's Strongest Man until 34. Mark Felix didn't start Strongman until 37. Nick Best was getting into Strongman in his late 30s. It's not all about just being the best 19, 20-year-old. You've got to, I think we all have like a certain amount of time in the sport, and it's making sure you keep progressing. It's what I say to so many people. You can be the best 20-year-old in the world, but if you don't get better, it means nothing. You've got to make sure you keep progressing, and I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And, another thing, some guys have done, whether it's strongman or strength athletics or other intense athletics, they've been doing it since they were in Pampers when they were super young. But I was a swimmer in high school, but towards the very end of high school. And then I didn't get into rugby until college. So it wasn't until after rugby that I got into strongman. So my time in the sport is still relatively new. But one thing that I always felt to be true was that the strongman prime wasn't until between 35 and 40. I'm still way away from that, and I know the road is still climbing upwards. So, but longevity in the sport is definitely something I've always valued. A lot of the questions that we got leading into World's Strongest Man was, oh, well, who do you look up to the most, or who is your favorite strongman competitors? And it's really easy to go through the list of like the super giants, like Shaw and Thor. But I called their attention. I'm like, look to the guys who've been doing this well for a long, sustained amount of time. They don't just burn out quick, but they continue to burn bright for years to come. And, guys like Nick Best, Mark Felix, I mean, those are the type of competitors that I aspire to be, I don't, and that's probably why I went to talk to the medical staff to make sure I was okay, because I don't want to have anything pull me out from a long, fruitful career.
I'm glad to hear it. It is important to enjoy it. Enjoy the kind of whole road. Enjoy the sport. You'll know yourself. It's a tough sport. I don't need to tell you that. But sometimes people watching, they kind of, sometimes they want that fame. They want to be sort of at the top level, but they don't enjoy what they do. And I think in a sport like strongman, you need to enjoy it. You really do. And
you got to have fun with it.
It is. It's hard to explain kind of why you enjoy it. I mean, at the end of the day, all we do is pick stuff up and put it back down and move around with it. But it's just that feeling that it gives you. I couldn't, even though I've retired from World's Strongest Man, but I still train. I don't think I'll ever stop training just because it's part of me. It's part of what I do, and I love watching the new guys. I love watching guys like yourself coming through, all the guys. I mean, this year there was a lot of new guys, and guys, every single one of those new guys was an excellent athlete. Very
hungry too, and they all, just like myself, they all felt that sense of belonging there. Like they're going to fight and claw their way back there too. So I know it's not as easy as being like, oh, I'm going to be there in 2021.
And let's be honest, there's a whole list of guys that weren't there that are awesome athletes as well, knocking on that door. So for all of us, if we're competing, it's tough to just get to World's Strongest Man. It's a huge achievement. And, I'm sure you're motivated to get back and do even better, but there's going to be guys watching that want to take that place. So you need to kind of keep working hard, keep moving forwards. But anyway, rather than moving forwards, I want you to take me back to where it all started for you. You said you were a swimmer in school. When did you get involved in strength? When would the bug bite, if you like?
In high school for swimming, we did strength and conditioning, a little bit of time in the weight room. But it wasn't until I was in college that I started gearing my efforts towards more of like a bodybuilding type training. I wanted to get stronger. I wanted to get bigger. I had always looked back to when I was a kid, watching World's Strongest Man air on Thanksgiving here in the States with my father and grandfather. And, whether or not I knew at the time that I could do it, I definitely watched it in a way that I aspired in one way or another to be like these guys. So I got into strength training probably around 20 years old, put on a lot of mass, a lot of size. I got into rugby around that time too. After about a year and a half or a year in rugby, I sought out a local strongman to kind of help my strength on the field. Of course, that's what I said, but in the back of my mind, I was like, I want to do some strongman stuff too. And it wasn't long until I got my first competition. I placed first in a local show, and I caught the bug. I knew in that moment that I was 100% capable of taking it to a high level. So that was back in 2013.
Okay.
2013, and shortly after that first victory, I had a nice hard lesson in axle clean and press and tore a bicep on a clean there. And, to get that lesson done with early was invaluable, but it didn't make it any easier. But that was kind of the breaking point between when I branched off of rugby and just went full strongman at that point.
Interesting talking to, I mean, I know you represented Mexico, but you're an American, aren't you? Texas homeboy.
Yes.
It's interesting talking to an American, talk about playing rugby.
Rather than not many of us.
Yeah. It's not so big over in the States, is it?
No, it's not. It's just one of those things where you'll find a club in a city. And
did you play rugby league or rugby union?
What's that?
You play rugby league or rugby union?
League.
Okay.
But it was I believe it's the equivalent of a semi-pro status here in the States.
Yeah.
We competed and against different teams across the state of Texas. I never took it to a high enough level to where we went outside of the state.
Sure. But it's I know so many great strongmen, obviously from this side of the pond, that come from rugby backgrounds, myself included. I was a rugby player. Terry Hollands was a great rugby player. And there's a whole host of like some of the great South Africans from the past were rugby players. So it's not a bad, basis to get that strength and athleticism as well.
Absolutely. And you get a good sense of how the body works together as a symphony of the whole, not just single isolated groups. And it's so much fun. I miss it a lot. I bump into the guys at the dive bar every now and then here in town, but Strongman has taken me.
Yeah. Strongman. I think it's that the individual, I love the team side of things, but I think, I don't know how you are, but as an athlete, I feel I didn't want other people letting me down, and I didn't want to let other people down. I was a better individual athlete because it was all on me then.
Yeah, that aspect of having full control of where your fate goes is. Yeah, I'm right there with you on that.
So 2013, you tore the bicep, was it?
2013, tore the bicep, branched off from rugby. Took roughly about 6 months to where I could get back into hard training and competing again. 2014, I got back to full-on competing, and I qualified to nationals in 2015, my first nationals appearance. In 2015 for nationals here in the States, I placed third in my division. And it was every competition that I had done from that point out was always, you have placed highly at this stage. You know where you belong. I went from there to my first Arnold in 2016, a few months later, and I placed fourth at the Arnold Amateur. And I went into that day two. I went after day one, first place going into the finals. And that was, very reassuring and reaffirming, like, hey, again, this is where you belong. Just keep working hard. You're at the top. You're going to continue to take it further and further. So over the course of the next 3 years, my first Arnold was in 2016, where I placed fourth. I had a couple of attempts at getting a pro card, which I missed by half a point. And that's not just one time. I got probably about 5 different occurrences where it just barely got out of my grasp. And as painful as they were, those narrow losses forced a technicality and a sense of precision in my performance that, I'm armed with today, and it's invaluable having undergone that, because that makes me a very high caliber competitor who doesn't make these sloppy mistakes that can be costly.
Yeah.
In 2019, I competed at the North American National Championships. I won the North American National Championships, and that's where I got my pro card. And that took me to the Arnold in 2020 this year. I got third place, narrowly missed it against 2 Russians, Evgeny Markov and Dmitry Skorsky, I think. Forgive me for that name, Dmitry, if you're out there. But that was my last show prior to World's Strongest Man. And that was back in March. And since March, I have just built an even stronger and bigger and badder platform to where I went into World's Strongest Man knowing I was ready. I had no doubt in my mind that I was ready to go.
It's amazing, really. I mean, it's really quite. You say 2013 is when you started, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
To get to World's Strongest Man, and you haven't done any internationals as well. You've obviously impressed some people along the way.
I like to think so.
Yeah, I mean, the Arnold's Amateur is an extremely tough contest because literally you have guys like anyone from all over the world. It's a real good route to get noticed. And like you said, I mean, I don't know the 2 Russian guys that you mentioned, but I know they'll be good. I know how good some of the, the Eastern European guys are. I know there's Polish guys that are unbelievably good, and it's hard to get noticed sometimes. So to kind of really shine amongst those guys, normally if you're top 3 or winning the Arnolds, you're a pro level athlete without question. And a top pro level athlete. It's a tough contest to win. And how many people usually enter that?
Let's see. I want to say around 50, 54, I think was what we had going into this year for the heavyweight division. And with, of course, only the top 10 going to the finals. And
it's normally 50 good guys as well, isn't it? It's not, guys just making up numbers. Because obviously you've got to, fund your own way there. It's not cheap. And it's such a unique opportunity to get noticed and get that opportunity. Obviously, I think if you win, you get to go to the Arnold's the following year anyway, don't you?
Correct. First place goes to the Classic. Yeah,
that's a big incentive.
Oh, that's probably one of the biggest.
Yeah, you can almost go from amateur to Mike Jenkins did that, didn't he? I don't know if you remember Mike. He won the amateur Arnold's, went on to compete in the main Arnold's, and then a year after that he won it. It's an amazing opportunity. And it's good to see new talent coming through. I've been thoroughly impressed with your performances. I really enjoyed your vlogs that you're doing at World's Strongest Man. I think that's excellent. That it's something that strongmen need to do now because the fan base is growing.
Exactly. And that put me in touch with a lot of fans who I didn't even know were keeping an eye on me. And especially during this weird year, to have that inclusion in a sport or in an event where there's no spectators allowed to, that was just one extra way to, kind of collectively bring in the fans to the whole experience. And I got a lot of positive feedback from that. So I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with those.
Yeah, keep doing them because they will bring, new fans to yourself. And although, like you say, there was no fans actually there watching, when this all goes on TV and suddenly people know who you are, it's going to bring you opportunities. And, you look at guys like Evan who try to be memorable. We don't all need to go down the WWE route. It works for him, but just being yourself, being approachable, and showing people what you do, it's great to see. Because I used to struggle with this. I used to think, I'm just a competitor. I just got to go there and lift. But people are fascinated by what we do, and it's nice to see that the sport actually has that interest now.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to tell that these athletes are people you can communicate with too. They're not just big ogres who go lift stone.
They can actually hold a conversation and things like that.
Yeah.
You're not just a meathead, no?
No, not just a meathead.
Well, you've got way too much hair for that. I mean, I'm jealous. How much? That's ridiculous.
You jealous?
Yeah. Far too jealous.
I'm jealous of your beard, so there you go.
No, that's awesome. So next year, the goal is get back to Worlds. You've got a competition, do you say January?
Yeah, January here in the States, and then hoping everything opens up abroad. That I would really want to make it a point to do some international shows. I'm sure the wife would like to travel abroad too with me, so that'd be fun.
So have you got any like training partners? I know mine's gone blank. Trey Mitchell, he's in Texas as well, isn't he? Do you guys manage to train at all?
Yeah, he's like a brother to me. We both started out competing right around the same time. But the thing about Texas is it's very big.
It's huge.
So he's still about 8 hours northeast of me. And, if we can ever get a point to get together and train, that's something I would love to do. But in my neck of the woods, I'm in the very southern tip of Texas. I get a stone's throw away from Mexico. There's not very many heavyweights down here. But I will say aside from my career as an athlete, I also am an active promoter of strongman here in the region. I work with Strongman Corporation, and I'm one of their state chairs, and we put on competitions. We have grown a lot of the strongman base here in South Texas, and there's a lot of strong folks here who necessarily wouldn't have known that there was an outlet like this, which now they do. So I'm hoping to be grooming some of my future training partners in the meantime. But I do have one buddy of mine, shout out to my friend Matthew Barba. He's in Brownsville, about an hour away from me. He does make it a point to come up and train with me. He was helping me get ready for Worlds and America's Strongest Man when I was training for that. So it is invaluable to have another heavyweight around to push. I'm sure we can get by with training with our middleweight and lightweight friends, but it really helps to have that.
It's always nice when you can sort of meet up. I mean, although the UK is not a huge country, we seem to be kind of the best athletes seem to be quite scattered around the country. So you'd end up traveling like 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours sometimes to go and try and train with some of the top guys. But it definitely helps to have some good training partners around.
Yeah, but even a 3 to 5 hour trip, that is so worth it, even for like maybe once or a few times a month, because sure. You have the monotony and just training by yourself, and you need to really toggle into that competitive fire to get ready for these events, because that's the best way to prepare on all fronts.
Are you finding the popularity is growing in the States at the moment?
I think it is. And I think a lot of companies like Rogue here in the States are doing big things for strongman too. Yeah. I got asked questions before, like, do you ever foresee strongman being as big in the States as it is in Europe? And I think it will. But something that needs to happen is it needs to be somehow brought into the realm of television more. That's one thing that we are falling behind here, but I'm optimistic within the next 5 to 10 years that it can really take off to stadium shows. That would be so great, man.
I hope so. I mean, I'd love to see that, especially obviously we have them in the UK. I think the luxury we have over here is we have a lot of people in a small space. the country is not big. We have a lot of people still, whereas you guys are spread throughout the States. It's a much bigger area, and it's harder, I guess, then for fans to just come to various different shows. Whereas is in the UK, you're looking at probably 6 to 8 hours is the longest anyone's going to have to travel for a lot of these shows. Whereas you guys, you're going to have to be getting flights or 20 to 30-hour journeys. And
but there is very obviously an ever-growing fan base here. And that's something that's exciting, because we are seeing from year to year the rewards, the care taken to athletes, the sponsorships, those are all just moving on up. So I'm very optimistic that we are right on track.
I hope so. I really do. I just want to. I'm someone that just wants to see this sport grow and grow and grow, and I know you do as well. You're doing a lot to promote it locally, and I think we just need to keep doing what we're doing. I don't have all the answers. I wish I did, but I'm going to keep trying. Make sure you keep promoting yourself, keep promoting the sport. I'm looking forward to seeing where you go now. And like I said, I hadn't heard of you beforehand, but I'm certainly going to be keeping an eye on you now. And I wish you all the best in the future, Gabe.
Thank you very much, Laz. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on. Just before I let you go, tell everyone where they can find you.
Y'all can find me on Instagram at Texas Titan Gabe. You can also find me on Facebook at Gabriel Pena. I'll be working on getting my YouTube up and running, so you can find me there, Gabriel Pena on YouTube. But give me a shout out on Instagram, Texas Titan Gabe. I'm most active there. Awesome.
We'll put a link for Gabe's Instagram in the description below. Again, thank you so much for coming on. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this chat. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and we'll be back with more Strength and Action soon. Take it easy. While you're here, guys, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my awesome strength content.